Communism, a political and economic ideology that aims to replace private property and profit-based economy with public ownership. What started as a peculiar theory in the book Das Kapital, written by Karl Marx, had then grown into a dominant political regime in the 20th century. About one-third of the world's population lived under communist regimes ruled by a totalitarian single-party state, the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. Having lost its grip over the numerous countries demanding independence, the Soviet Union fell in 1991. It is now 27 years since the Baltics and many West Asian countries have received sovereignty. However, the scars and marks the Soviet Union has left are still present to this very day. My home country, Latvia, is one of the former USSR countries. I have dug down deep to find out how life was in Soviet Latvia. My name is Arnis Prokopovich, and this is my family history. In the early Middle Ages, today's Latvia was split up primarily into 4 different Baltic tribes: Livonians, Latgalians, Curonians, and Semigallians. In the 12th century, German missionaries settled along the Daugava River to convert the mostly pagan-believing people to Christianity. The Germans also founded the city of Riga, which became a famous trading crossroad, the 3rd biggest city along the Baltic Sea. Between the 16th and the early 18th century, Russia, Sweden, and Poland-Lithuania all fought for the Baltic area. In 1768, the Russian Empire took control over Latvia. The authorities Russified Latvia. They completely banned the Latvian language in schools, and joining the Russian Orthodox Church became mandatory. Latvia was now in the hands of Mother Russia. During the last quarter in the 19th century, a national revival surged through Latvia. The idea of an independent Latvia was openly discussed during the Russian Revolution in 1905. After the Russian Revolution in 1917, the Latvian Political Conference of Riga asked for complete political autonomy. After different conflicts and difficulties, in 1920 a Latvian-Soviet peace treaty was signed in Riga, under which the Soviet government renounced all claims to Latvia. During this period, a contest was held to design a monument for Latvia's independence. A statue of the Russian ruler Peter the Great was torn down and replaced by the newly built Freedom Monument. Atop of it, a woman holding 3 stars that stand for the 3 historic regions of Latvia. People globally now saw a real chance for an independent Latvia to exist. Sadly, this was not the case.
They cleared pathways for the tanks to follow.
When World War II started in September 1939, the fate of Latvia had already been decided in the secret protocol of the German-Soviet Non-Aggression Pact. On June 17, 1940, Latvia was invaded by the Red Army. In the first year of Soviet occupation, 35,000 Latvians were deported to Siberia, especially the intelligentsia. Latvia was then invaded by Germany in 1941 to October 1944. The concentration camp Kaiserwald was built, where 10,000 people had to do forced labor. After Germany, Latvia was occupied by Russia once again. Extreme Russification numbed the Latvian culture and traditions. Several mass deportations occurred of at least 140,000 people were deported to northern Siberia, and the Latvian population fell drastically. Over 40,000 Latvians were deported in 1949 without a right to ever return to their country. The Russian language dominated both in the public and private life. Troublemakers for the Soviet Union were often imprisoned without a trial, or sent to the gulags, where thousands died. After decades of occupation, a large peace demonstration was held, called the Baltic Way. Approximately 2 million people joined hands to form a human chain spanning over 650 kilometers across the three Baltic states, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. Soon after, a Latvian legislator declared full independence, which was recognized by the Soviet Union on September 6, 1991. I really wanted to know more. I wanted to know the roots of Soviet Latvia. I called up my dad on Skype, and I found out that I had a grandfather called Jānis Prokopovich, and in English would be John. He was this big tall man with charcoal-like hair, and he was exiled to Siberia in 1954 when my grandfather, Papans Prokopovich, was 13 years old. Now John had a bit of a status. Actually, he was the one checking all the prices. And it may be due to his big size, because who would mess with such a big strong guy? But there was only one problem. Back in Soviet times, the weights of when they weighed the grain were actually very imprecise. So let's say that high-ranking officials from St. Petersburg would come and give 4 tons of grain. There may have been several hundred of kilograms of error. John, he was feeding the cattle. They had to be so precise that not even one little grain was left. So if the high-ranking officials would come and see that there was too much grain left, they would think that you are either too lazy or too stupid to feed the cattle, which means, of course, that you have to be executed or sent to Siberia. On the other hand, if you had too little grain, that would mean that you were a thief, that you would store the grain, sell it yourself, or eat it, and that was a very big penalty for that. He actually was given too much grain. And then when his days of feeding the cattle were over, which meant that he had to be given another storage of grain, he had 10 bags of grain left. But John knew the big penalties. So what he did was that he drove out to a nearby forest and he dug down all the big bags of grain. But unfortunately, his neighbor told the high-ranking officials the other day, and the high-ranking officials came to the forest and took out all the 10 bags of grain, and for every single bag of grain that was stored under the ground in the forest, he would be given 1 year of exile to Siberia. So thus, 10 years of exile in Siberia. But my grandfather John was actually very, very fortunate. He was not sent out to the harsh climates of Siberia. Instead, he was sent out to a forest where he had to hunt and live all alone for 10 years. His wife and all his kids and family were left alone to survive. This was the harsh truth for many families in Soviet Latvia. Wives were left alone to handle the harsh life, with or without their husbands. And imagine when my grandfather, he came out alive. Many families had husbands, sons, and daughters who did not come out alive. Many were sent to gulags, left to die. While many Western European countries had an economic boost leading up to the 90s, my dad, together with his father, mother, and 3 brothers, lived out in a forest very, very far away from the city. Every single morning they would wake up very, very early to work out in the farm. If the harvest was bad, they wouldn't get any bread.
Kad bija mazs, 12-13 gadi, es nevarēju nevienu draugu uzaicināt dzīvot. Man nebija, kur viņu atrast, pie kauna. Un nebija nekur pie lagu vienas kurpes uz visu veidu.
Clothes were only manufactured in the Soviet Union, according to the planned economy, which meant that there weren't produced more clothes than were necessary. My father told us with embarrassment that he only had one pair of jeans to wear. Many adults and children were brainwashed when watching television due to the state controlling the TV. My father exclusively mentioned that everything that came from Europe and America was pure evil. Well, that's at least what they told in the TV. So Latvians didn't really have any other information about the world. They were controlled like puppets from the Soviet Union. The culture was extremely numbed. Even Christmas was forbidden to celebrate. Families would put up big pieces of cloth to cover up their windows so they could celebrate in peace. But policemen and police officers would go around house to house, taking away these big pieces of cloth or knocking on the doors to see if anybody had trespassed the law. Everywhere in school, the Soviet heroes were exalted. There were even made songs which highly praised Lenin as a god. Religion was forbidden, and it was a taboo to talk about it in public. Chaos was present in Latvia due to the kolkhozes and sovkhozes were breaking down. Imagine decades of occupation and decades of the job marketing and structure just being torn down. A big percentage of the population worked in agriculture, so thus it meant that people didn't have a job anymore. Nobody knew where to look, and it took very many years to fix it. And my father exclusively said that, especially in this year, there was almost no bread on the table.
Tas bija tas, kad Latvija brīva palika, tad bija smags laiks. Es vienmēr Romam stāstu, tu nēsāji to pienu, rokas, protams, katrā somā bija pieni, krējumi, piespiedi, sviesti. 15-20 kg man bija uz katra pleca. Man bija tad 14 gadi, 15.
Now, hearing all of this may seem shocking because I live in Denmark now. We have an amazing economy. We have a state that's willing to help us. And I asked my dad, what do you see when you look back? What do you think about the Soviet Latvian times? And this is what he said.
Bet, lai es pateiktu, ka es ļoti biju par to bēdīgs, tas nav nekas traks, jo mēs paskatāmies apkārt, vēl trakākas lietas notiek Āfrikā, tagad joprojām cilvēki, bērni mirst no tā, ka nepietiek ūdens, ja? Tā kā es jau varu pateikt, mums bija ūdens, mums bija daudz kas, ja?